The Testament of Zebulun, Chapter 1. The copy of the words of Zebulun, which he pressed upon his sons before he died in the 114th year of his life, 2 years after the death of Joseph. And he said to them, Listen to me, you sons of Zebulun, and attend to the words of your father. I, Zebulun, was born as a good gift for my parents. For when I was born, my father was very wealthy, both in flocks and herds, when with the white striped rods he had gained his portion. I am not conscious of having sinned for all my days, except in my thoughts. Nor can I recall having done any iniquity, except for the sin of ignorance, which I committed against Joseph. For I covenanted with my brothers not to tell my father what had been done to him. But I secretly wept for many days on account of Joseph. For I feared my brothers, because they had all agreed that if anyone should reveal their evil scheme, that person should be killed. But when they wished to kill Joseph, I adjured them, much with tears, not to be guilty of this sin. For Simeon and Gad came against Joseph to kill him, and he said to them with tears, Pity me, my brothers, have mercy upon the bowels of our father Jacob. Do not lay your hands upon me to shed innocent blood, for I have not sinned against you. And if indeed I have sinned, then discipline me with punishment, my brothers. But do not lay your hands upon me, for the sake of our father Jacob. And as he spoke these words, wailing as he did so, I was unable to bear his lamentations, and began to weep, and my liver was poured out, and all the substance of my bowels was loosened. And I wept with Joseph, and my heart sounded, and the joints of my body trembled, and I was not able to stand. And when Joseph saw me weeping with him, and them coming against him to kill him, he ran behind me and begged them. But meanwhile Reuben arose and said, Come, my brothers, let us not slay him, but let us cast him into one of these dry pits, which our fathers dug, and found no water. It was for this reason that Yahweh forbade that water should rise up in them, in order that Joseph should be preserved. And they did so, until they sold him to the Ishmaelites. For I had no share in Joseph's selling price, my children. But Simeon and Gad and 6 of my other brothers took the money from Joseph's sale, and bought sandals for themselves, and their wives, and their children, saying, We will not eat of it, for it is the price of our brother's blood. But we will assuredly tread it underfoot, because he said that he would be king over us. And so let us see what will become of his dreams. Therefore, it is written in the writing of the law of Moses, that whosoever will not raise up seed to his brother, his sandals shall be unloosened, and they should spit in his face. And Joseph's brothers wished not that their brother should live. And Yahweh loosed from them the sandal which they wore against Joseph their brother. For when they came to Egypt, they were unloosed by the servants of Joseph outside the gate. And so they made obeisance to Joseph, after the fashion of King Pharaoh. And not only did they make obeisance to him, but were spit upon also, immediately falling down before him, and were put to shame before the Egyptians. For after this, the Egyptians heard all the evils that they had done to Joseph. And after he was sold, my brothers sat down to eat and drink. But I, through pity for Joseph, did not eat, but watched the pit, since Judah feared lest Simeon, Dan, and Gad should rush off and slay him. But when they saw that I was not eating, they set me to watch him, until he was sold to the Ishmaelites. And when Reuben came and heard that Joseph had been sold while he was away, he tore his garments, and mourning, said, How will I look upon the face of my father Jacob? And he took the money and ran after the merchants, but he failed to find them, and returned to his grieving. But the merchants took a shortcut, and had left the broad road, and marched through the area of the cave dwellers. But Reuben was grieved, and ate no food that day. So Dan came to him and said, Don't weep, neither grieve, for we have found what we can say to our father Jacob. Let us slay a kid of the goats, and dip Joseph's coat in its blood, and let us send it to Jacob, saying, Is this the coat of your son? And they did so, for they stripped the coat off of Joseph when they were selling him, and put upon him the garment of a slave. Now Simeon took the coat, and would not give it up, for he wished to tear it with his sword, as he was angry that Joseph lived, and that he had not killed him. Then we all rose up and said to him, If you don't give up the coat, we will say to our father that you alone did this evil act in Israel. And so he gave it to them, and they acted according to the plan that Dan had devised. Chapter 2. And now, children, I implore you to keep Yahweh's commandments and to show mercy to your neighbors. Have compassion towards all, and not towards men only, but also towards beasts. For all this thing's sake, Yahweh blessed me, and when all my brothers were sick, I escaped without illness, for Yahweh knows the purposes of each. Have compassion in your hearts, my children, because even as a man does to his neighbor, even so Yahweh will also do to him. For the sons of my brothers were sick and dying because of what was done to Joseph, because they had not shown mercy in their hearts. But my sons were preserved without sickness, as you know. And when I was in the land of Canaan, by the sea coast, I made a catch of fish for my father Jacob. And when many were choked in the sea, I continued unhurt. I was the first to make a boat to sail upon the sea, for Yahweh gave me understanding and wisdom in that respect. And I let down a rudder behind it, and I stretched a sail upon another upright piece of wood in the midst. And I sailed in that place along the shores, catching fish for the house of my father until we came to Egypt. And through compassion, I shared my catch with every stranger. And if a man were a stranger, or sick, or aged, I boiled the fish and dressed them well, and offered them to all men, as every man had need, grieving with and having compassion upon them. As a result of which also Yahweh satisfied me with abundance of fish when catching fish. For he that shares with his neighbor receives much more from Yahweh. For 5 years I caught fish and gave from my catch to every man whom I saw, and still had a sufficient amount for all the house of my father. And in the summer I caught fish, and in the winter I kept sheep with my brothers. Now I will declare to you what I did. I saw a man in the wintertime who was in distress because of his nakedness, and I had compassion upon him, and stole away a garment secretly from my father's house, and gave it to this man who was in distress. Consequently, my children, do also show compassion and mercy without hesitation to all men, out of that which God blesses you with, and give to every man with a good heart. And if you do not have the money to give to someone who is in need, have compassion for him in bowels of mercy. I know that my hand found not the money to give to him that needed, and I walked with him weeping for 7 furlongs, and my bowels yearned towards him in compassion. Have compassion towards every man with mercy, my children, so that Yahweh may also have compassion and mercy upon you. Because also in the last days, God will send his compassion on the earth, and wherever he finds bowels of mercy, he will dwell in him. For in the degree in which a man has compassion upon his neighbors, in the same degree Yahweh also has upon him. And when we went down to Egypt, Joseph bore no malice against us. To whom taking heed, do you also, my children, approve yourselves without malice, and love one another, and do not set down in account, each one of you, evil against his brother. For this breaks unity, and divides kindred, and troubles the soul, and wears away the countenance upon your face. For that reason, observe the waters, and know when they flow together. They sweep along stones, trees, earth, and other things. But if they are divided into many streams, the earth swallows them up, and they vanish away. So will you also be, if you are divided. Do not be divided into 2 heads, for everything which Yahweh made has but one head, and 2 shoulders, 2 hands, 2 feet, and all the remaining members. For I have learned in the writings of my fathers that you will be divided in Israel, and you will follow 2 kings, and will work every abomination. And your enemies will lead you captive, and you'll be treated with evil among the nations, with many infirmities and tribulations. And after these things you will remember Yahweh and repent, and he will have mercy upon you, for he is merciful and compassionate. And he sets not down in account evil against the sons of men, because they are flesh, and are deceived through their own wicked deeds. And after these things Yahweh himself will arise to you, the light of righteousness, and you will return to your land. And you will see him in Jerusalem for his name's sake. And again, through the wickedness of your words will you provoke him to anger. And you will be cast away by him until the time of consummation. And now, my children, do not grieve that I am dying, nor be cast down because I am coming to my life's end. For I will rise again in the midst of you, as a ruler in the midst of his sons. And I will rejoice in the midst of my tribe, as many as will keep the law of Yahweh, and the commandments of Zebulun their father. But upon the ungodly will Yahweh bring eternal fire, and destroy them throughout their generations. But I am now quickly heading to my rest, as my fathers also did. But be sure to fear Yahweh our God with all your strength for all the days of your life. And when Zebulun had said these things, he fell asleep at a good old age. And his sons laid him in a wooden coffin. And afterwards they carried him up and buried him in Hebron with his fathers.